This is the factory. As you can see, it's just endless amounts. Like, every floor looks like this. It's just fucking destroyed and beat up and, you know, looted beyond belief. Yeah, over here, this used to be the party room. It was almost like a weird water hazard getting to it. But yeah, this was the party room. LTV hangout room. There you go. Yeah. Oh, Weibo. That's cool, dude. Fresh Paint NYC was here. Yeah, you could see it. There was like these little embeds. There was one on the floor downstairs that kind of looked like a roadway. There's one here too. So maybe they were using this to move product maybe down that way to an elevator. Yeah, you can see there's not a place to bring the kids, that's for sure. But there's been a million fucking videos about this place all over the internet, so I'm just doing this because it's fun and because I have a personal connection to this space, having partied here a few times over the years, and again this year, which is cool. I wasn't sure I'd ever get to see this place again, so here we are. It's nice to get back to old haunts every now and then. Nice sharp shard. You see all that green over there? Yeah, all it takes is a little bit of dirt and a little bit of water and all kinds of things will grow. Really hardy plants will grow, even in an abandoned, decaying, destroyed space like this. I find this fascinating. It's also the subject of a book by Cal Flynn called Islands of Abandonment. Highly recommend this book. A little bit of dirt, a little bit of water, and life will grow, even in a horrible, bombed out place like this one. So that's the video I took from inside the factory. The rest you saw in the last video where I just hung out with a bunch of people blowing off some fireworks. So let's take a look at some photos I took in 2018, 2019 that show you some of the other floors within the factory, because there's a little bit of cool stuff down there. So many of the floors had these big giant holes in the floor where completed parts would get lowered from the top floors down to the lower levels of the building. And on some of those lower levels, at least one of those lower levels, there is a freight car siding where I believe some of the passenger car testing might have taken place, but also where they loaded up goods to be transported to the other factories out west.
Oh my. Oh my. Just waiting for the train. Just waiting for the N train. Nice and yellow.
So yeah, no trains have come down that track in a really long time. So the entire factory is very much like this. A lot of open spaces. Everything has been removed. Anything of any value. There's a lot of openings for conveyor belts and elevators. Not a lot of stairs. The huge windows in this place kind of point out how tall each floor ceiling is. The building is technically 6 or 7 stories high, but really it's more like 12 given how tall the ceilings are. And that is to accommodate a lot of manufacturing equipment like this overhead crane, for example. So really tremendously huge building. Outside, you hear a lot of city noises, things bouncing around. You pretty much, with no windows, you hear everything that's outside, inside. So you have good situational awareness. So let's talk about Bud's history in the railcar industry. The Bud factory was established in 1912 by Edward G. Budd. Budd grew to fame by developing steel bodies for automobiles and pioneering different welding techniques. Today, much of the Philadelphia factory, as you've seen, is a decaying mess. There was a second factory where most of railcar production took place. That was demolished in the early 2000s. So no, I don't have any interior photos of that one. Here is the exterior of the Bud factory back in 1924. Here it is, as you just saw, in 2025. Back in 1929, 100 years ago, they were building entire automobile bodies in there, and you could see the little conveyor belt that they're all going on. These parts were shipped out of the factory for construction elsewhere. And how were they shipped? Many of these auto parts were shipped in boxcars. You can see this one here is specially equipped for transporting roofs from the factory to other factories where the cars were assembled. You can see special little clips at the top of the car and the bottom of the car to keep the rooftops in place. So during World War II, Bud also dabbled in airplane production. This was a pioneering design for a transport aircraft that the military bought maybe 24 of. There's only one left in a museum. It was a very small purchase. They had originally ordered significantly more, but they weren't very reliable, and it was getting towards the end of the war. So while this was a really cool design, there's only one left, and it's kind of a mess at the museum that it's located in. They also had other factories, obviously. Here's one in Gary, Indiana. They also had one in Detroit. We all know how Gary, Indiana has turned out, so let's not even talk about Gary because we'll be here all day. So what about the trains? Here's a really cool brochure that I found on Steve Lynch's Trains Are Fun Long Island Railroad history site. Steve's a really cool guy, and this is really fantastic to have this little artifact available online. You could see a few different cars here, but I'm going to specifically talk about the Metro liners here at the bottom and all of the cars that the New York City Transit Systems purchased. So how did Bud get into the rail industry? Here's one of their early examples, 1935 Burlington Zephyr, a streamliner train that made a dawn-till-dusk 13-hour dash from Denver to Chicago, highly publicized, heralding in the future of rail transport with this really cool, innovative design. A design that was built in Philadelphia. It was later rebranded the Pioneer Zephyr, and it was successful enough for the railroad to order 7 more train sets, and the original of these train sets is preserved in the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago. So, that brings us to the RDC, another success story for Bud. This was a self-propelled passenger car, didn't need a locomotive. You could have one passenger car, you could have multiples of them strung together. It was really well designed, and it worked out really well, particularly for Northeast railroads that had many branch lines that still had passenger service, but not a huge amount of riders. It was a really cost-effective way to transport passengers. So between 1949 and 1962, 398 RDCs were built. Commuter railroads kept them active through the 1980s, and numerous museums and tourist train operators acquired them after they were retired from commuter service, and many of them are still operational 60-plus years later. Another testimony to how awesome Bud's manufacturing was at the time. This brings us to some very recognizable cars on the Long Island Railroad and Metro North. And we're going to start with the M1. This served as the backbone of the Long Island Railroad and Metro North fleets. This was when the MTA was taking over Long Island Railroad, New Haven, and New York Central, Penn Central commuter operations, and they standardized and modernized their fleet with the M1 cars. These cars ran great from throughout the 70s, late 70s, 80s, 90s, up until early 2000s when they were replaced with M7 cars. Nearly all of the M1s were scrapped. The Long Island Railroad M1 cars were typically transported out of town on a Canadian Pacific train over Hellgate Bridge. M1's long gone, brings us to north of the city. We have the M2 cars. These ran between Grand Central Terminal in New York City and New Haven, Connecticut, along Northeast Corridor. 242 of these cars were built in the 1970s. They turned in really solid performances until the M8 cars came along starting in 2012. And the last remaining cars between, say, 2017, 2019, 2020, they were all sent to a scrapyard in Ohio, which is a place I visited, which is kind of amazing. And you can see that car over there being shredded. Sorry if that's too ghoulish for you, but yes, trade cars do get recycled. Here we have EB3 cars. They basically looked exactly like M1 cars, except they were built in between 1984 and 1985. 316 of these were built. Many of the M3 cars are still in use on Long Island Railroad and Metro North, although the Metro North cars are arguably a little bit better maintained and better shape. And Long Island Railroad, for a while, had a ton of junk M3 cars. So between, say, 2017 and 2020, Long Island Railroad started to purge a lot of the junk stored, broken down M3 cars that they had. So those cars were brought down to Wheel Spur Yard down Long Island City, right across the river from Manhattan. That's the skyline of Manhattan in the background there. They were transloaded onto flat cars because they couldn't be pulled under their own wheels for whatever reason, and they were also sent to Ohio and scrapped. Now, interestingly, their time in Long Island City and other parts of Queens before they were sent out to scrap, they were painted, bombarded with graffiti by some of the most notorious graffiti writers in New York City history. So it is a really niche history. I've got photos of all of this, and it's all going to be covered in a future book. Now that the statute of limitations is done, I can finally talk about this amazing amount of artwork that took place on these cars that were heading out to get recycled anyway. So that brings us to the Bud New York City subway cars. They built two different designs for the subway. One of them was the R11, which was a 10-car test train meant for the 2nd Avenue subway. The 2nd Avenue subway, of course, has been a 100-year-plus fiasco. I'm not even going to get into that. The next set of cars was the 600 R32 cars, which were built in the 1960s. They were the longest-running subway cars to date. So, again, another testimonial to Bud's manufacturing prowess back in the 1960s. Although I should add the asterisk that these cars were rebuilt in the 1980s, which extended their life significantly. So by the early 2000s, there were only a few R32s left on the property, and they were being sent to the Sims Recycling Factory out there in Jersey City. They were moved on their own wheels across the Cross Harbor Railroad, pulled across on car floats, and sent out there for scrap. The New York City transit system does have an R11 car in the museum. There is one example still left, and there's an entire train of R32s that they kept in case of like movie production and for fan trips and cool stuff like that. Vast majority of them, though, were scrapped by crazy people. Who's that crazy guy in there? Let's not even go there. So let's talk about some of Bud's flops. Here we have the SPV. This was supposed to be a car to replace the RDCs. Self-powered, you could have one car run on its own, you could have multiples of them. Metro North bought a few, Connecticut Department of Transportation bought a few, Amtrak. Yeah, they were called seldomly powered vehicles. That was not their official abbreviation, but they worked so poorly that they were eventually converted to diesel-hauled passenger cars. And that brings us to the Metroliners, another notorious failure for Bud. In the beginning, Pennsylvania Railroad ordered 61 of these multiple unit cars. They wanted to run an extremely fast train from New York to Washington, D.C. and compete with the airlines. The Metroliner, as it was branded, It served that purpose, it met that goal, but it also proved to be incredibly unreliable. So Penn Central took delivery of these things, finally started using them in 1969. Didn't work out that great. Then Amtrak inherited them, and they had all kinds of speed limits put on them. You could see in the back of this train, you've got the original paint scheme. Up front is a new Amtrak paint scheme that didn't last too long. They eventually all looked like this, but by the mid 1980s, these Metro liners were just too unreliable, and Amtrak was buying up new locomotives like the AEM7, which became the backbone of their Northeast Corridor fleet. So Metroliners were very quickly replaced and displaced out of service. That said, behind our locomotive here, we've got a look at those tubular cars. Those are Bud designed cars. And many of those Bud passenger cars are still in service today on Northeast Corridor and various Northeast lines. So Amtrak did find some reuses for the cars. Some of them became cab cars, things like that. But ultimately, it was a flop. And this mixed reputation of cars that worked great and cars that just kind of flopped, it didn't help Bud's bottom line. But by the mid 90s, their railcar business was basically toast. By 2002, they had closed the Philadelphia factory, and a decade later, Bud was no more, except for as a holding company to pay out retirement benefits and things like that. So, yeah, that is the Bud railcar history. It's a very quick overview. There's so many details. We could do like a 3-hour video on this, but no one needs that right now. If you want that level of thesis, I don't know, give me money in a tip jar or something. Send me like $600 or something. Maybe I'll do that. That would be a lot of detail, though. Who needs that? We've got books. You can read books about all kinds of abandoned trains. Don't forget, you can hit the profile link. You can get yourself one of these. I don't touch Bud in here, but I do touch upon the Ohio Scrapyard in that book. As I mentioned, there's going to be an upcoming book specifically about the Long Island Railroad M3 cars and various other machines that they were getting rid of. Yeah, that's going to be a really niche history book that's going to have a whole lot of graffiti history in it as well. So that'll probably be coming next year at this rate because it takes a while to get these things together. And volume 2 of this will be coming later this year. So get volume 1 before number 2 comes out. You don't want to fall behind here now, right? Okay, so that's the complete Bud package. I am done with Bud for a while. We will talk more about other abandoned trains. I'm probably going to take a couple of weeks off between videos. So, yeah, when I follow me on Instagram and all those other social media platforms, and you'll get to see more abandoned trains if you need a daily dose. That said, I will catch you all in the future. You got stuff to do. Yeah, I got things to do.